Premka, Khalsa, Kifate. Just yesterday, this Yogi Bhajan's chief of protocol, a Jiwan Singh Khalsa, has published a letter, I guess you might call it a review, of Pamela Dyson's new book, this Premka, My Life with Yogi Bhajan. Now, for all of you who have not read this book, I highly recommend it. Jiwan's letter is filled with disinformation and just plain lies about Pamela. So if you want to know the truth, read Pamela's book. And I'd also recommend that you visit the Facebook group Premka, White Bird in a Golden Cage. This is an in-depth discussion with many of the people who are actually there with Pamela during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then you can attest that Pamela is telling the truth in her book. I, for one, was there in the 80s around Pamela and around Yogi Bhajan, and I can attest to many of the things that Pamela says in the book as being truthful. And I can't say as much for this Jiwan Singh. Now, I knew this Jiwan Singh for 30 years or so. I worked with him, and the only one who's not telling the truth is this Jiwan Singh. Let's give you a little background on Jiwan Singh. He ran this boiler toner room in LA in the 80s that Yogi Bhajan supported and Jiwan Singh managed. This was a very fraudulent kind of business where we would call up and tell people that we were company working, we were the company that they bought their toners from and things like this. It was a very fraudulent business. And even after I left Los Angeles, Jiwan Singh and some of the other Yogi Bhajan followers got involved in selling gems on the telephone. Now, this gem business was another fraudulent business where they would sell these gems at highly inflated prices to elderly people. And eventually, the Federal Trade Commission came in and charged Jiwan Singh and several of the other Yogi Bhajan followers with fraud. In fact, the Federal Trade Commission called this a field of schemes when they busted Jiwan and these other Yogi Bhajan followers. And Yogi Bhajan, as you all know, was into gems. He bought and sold them. I'll put pictures of Jiwan and Yogi Bhajan at the end of this video so you can see for yourself the places where they visited in Beverly Hills and bought and sold these gems. So that's just a little bit of history on this Jiwan. Now, Jiwan says in this book, in his letter, he says here, and I'll put a copy of it here at the end, screenshot of it at the end of this video so you can read it yourself. It's just hard to believe that this person did it, but knowing him as I do, I know that he's a very chauvinistic person, and it's just appalling. So he says here, a book which has been recently written by Pamela Dyson, which must be addressed, he says. As chief of protocol, this duty falls upon my office. And he says there's an untold story about this book, a backstory which adds a great frame of reference, a new starting point. So Hari Jivan goes on to say in this letter, he talks about how Yogi Bhajan had a lot of enemies and how Pamela was in effect paid to file a lawsuit against Yogi Bhajan in the 1980s. Hari Jivan says here, our enemy hired a good writer. That's what he calls Pamela a good writer. And Hari Jivan tries to butter up his narrative here with trying to praise Pamela, which is really just a passive-aggressive strategy on Hari Jivan's part. Anybody who has any sense will see right through his fraud. That's what it is. It's just a fraud that he's pulling off again, just like he did with the gems and these other fraudulent businesses that he was involved in. And I know, because I was there, and shamefully I was working there for him. But this was at the direction of Yogi Bhajan. Now, I also want to point out that there is another Hari Jivan. You shouldn't get them mixed up. And it's a bit ironic that this other Hari Jivan, who now teaches LA, and teaches in LA, teaches Kundalini Yoga in LA, he was busted for fraud as well. And the other Hari Jivan, his name is just spelled slightly different. The Hari and the Jiwan are together in his name. And I worked with him as well. Sadly, I went along with a lot of his frauds. And Hari Jivan was convicted and sent to prison for 18 months, federal prison for fraud. And he was known as the toner bandit. He was involved in this toner boiler room. He owned one of the toilet boiler rooms there and was eventually sent to prison. So just so we have it straight, there are two Hari Jivans. One was a chief of protocol, and one was busted for selling gems at inflated prices to elderly people. And the other one was busted for selling toner without delivering product to the customers. And he spent 18 months in federal prison. So both of those were like henchmen for Yogi Bhajan and acting at Yogi Bhajan's direction. That's the reality of it. So when we're talking about fraud, both of these Hari Jivans, for that matter, will have a real good grasp of what fraud is and what lies are. So let's go on to look at more of the lies that Hari Jivan talks about in this letter. Now, Hari Jivan says that the judge in Pamela Dyson's case in the 1980s against Yogi Bhajan was dismissed. That is a blatant lie. The case was settled by Yogi Bhajan, and I don't know exactly how much was paid, but it was settled out of court. It was never dismissed by the judge. Those are facts. And Hari Jivan should know better, but I believe he is doing this purposely because he's a fraudster. He's a known fraudster. So let's look at what else Hari Jivan says. Now, the other accusation that Hari Jivan makes against Pamela is he's implying that she was paid by nefarious individuals, enemies of Yogi Bhajan, if you will, during the 1980s to file this lawsuit against Yogi Bhajan. And Hari Jivan says that the lawsuit was filled with lies. Well, you know, you don't settle a lawsuit that's made against you that's filled with lies. You settle a lawsuit to get rid of it because you're afraid of what's going to happen in court. That's why you settle on a lawsuit like that. So And I know for a fact that Yogi Bhajan would not appear at the depositions because he would always feign that he was ill at this deposition. I talked to the attorney that represented Pamela, and he told me that what would happen whenever they would subpoena Yogi Bhajan to come testify in this lawsuit, that he would get excuses, medical excuses from his doctors, his sympathetic 3HO doctors, that he was ill and that he couldn't attend these depositions. Well, I was around Yogi Bhajan doing security work in Los Angeles during the time of this case, this lawsuit that was going on. And I can tell you for a fact that almost every day we would go to La Scala, out to lunch, go shopping in Beverly Hills. And Hari Jiwan knows all this because he was with Yogi Bhajan all the time. I distinctly remember. So Hari Jiwan again is covering up the fact that Yogi Bhajan would never appear in these depositions because, as this attorney told me, Yogi Bhajan did not want to tell the truth under the bright lights, as this attorney told me. And the attorney also told me that Yogi Bhajan just wore Pamela down. Pamela and this Kate Felt, who also sued Yogi Bhajan, they just wore him down. And this is a common strategy if you want to get rid of a lawsuit. You throw a lot of money at the defense of it and hire a lot of attorneys, file many, many motions, keep the plaintiff in the court constantly, and it costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so finally, Premka just said this was enough of this, and she settled with Yogi Bhajan. But Yogi Bhajan never came forward and gave his deposition. That to me is a huge red flag. And it's just typical of the way this Hari Jiwan operates and the way these people spin all of this misinformation in order to discredit Pamela. Now, this is another statement that Hari Jiwan made in his letter. He says here, and there she is falling victim to it again. He says that Pamela is a pawn. This was one of her reasons as to why she left. She was a pawn in another's game, and there she is falling victim to it again. Such is life. Pamela is not the bad guy here. She's just a willing participant. The big culprit is the financier. As usual, Pamela is just playing her role. So he's really putting down Pamela. And it's just really sad to see that these Bhajanists have stooped to this level of just demeaning Pamela and her experience with Yogi Bhajan. Now, I can also say that Pamela is not the only one that they do this to, these Bhajanists demean. I have been criticizing Hari Jiwan and Yogi Bhajan for years now, probably going on about 10 years now. And they allege the same things against me, that I'm being paid by nefarious people that are enemies of Yogi Bhajan. So this is a common strategy. It is right in the playbook, if you will, of these Bhajanists to spin the information, to make it out like Pamela and anybody who criticizes Yogi Bhajan is being paid, and that they're just enemies trying to out to get Yogi Bhajan and the 3H organization. Now, I've written a book which goes in depth about this, and you can also buy this book on Amazon. It's called Confessions of an American Sikh, and it's available on Amazon, like I said. I recommend, if you want to read more about the inner workings of 3HO, and I talk extensively about my experiences with this Hari Jivan, both Hari Jivans for that matter, who were very close to Yogi Bhajan. So if you want to read more about all of this, just go to Amazon and search for Confessions of American Sikh by Guru Sant Singh. Let's see what else Hari Jivan is talking about. So I mentioned about how Hari Jivan was busted by the Federal Trade Commission. I put some pictures and some articles that were published about this bust, and you can see them at the end of this video. And then there's also a lot of comments from former followers at this wacko world of Yogi Bhajan. I would also recommend that you visit a Facebook page that's dedicated to discussing all this. It's called Premka, a white bird in a golden cage. It's a private group, and you can ask for permission to join the group. On my Facebook profile, you can ask me, and I will happily invite you or allow you to join the group. It's becoming a really valuable forum for those who want to discuss Pamela's book and want to know the truth. It's a really credible place, and place where you can all join in and discuss this book. And I invite all people, former and current followers of Yogi Bhajan, to come there to that group and discuss all these things. We need to sit down and discuss all of these accusations and all of the pain that's been caused by Yogi Bhajan, and just get to the bottom of how we can all work together and work this out. Now, I want to point out that Hari Jivan's wife, a Sat Bachan Kaur, she is running for this Siri Singh Sahib Corporation board. Now, this is a 10-member board that runs all of the Yogi Bhajan organizations. That's Yogi Tea, Akal Security, all the Kundalini Yoga businesses and organizations, the Kundalini Research Institute. So it's a very powerful board. And this Hari Jivan's wife, Sat Bachan Kaur, is running. She's actually a current member. And I would encourage you all to write her. There's some town hall meetings that are being held. In fact, these elections are coming up in just a couple of weeks for this board, where all the 3HO ministers, Sikh Dharma ministers, will be voting for this new board that controls all these businesses and organizations. And I am not invited, obviously. I refuse to take any kind of oath to Yogi Bhajan, which is required in order for you to vote in this election. Seems quite ironic. Anyway, so, but those who are able to vote, you should ask Sat Bachan Kaur about her husband's statements and if she supports them. Now, my experience after knowing Sat Bachan Kaur for probably 30 years, just like I've known Hari Jivan, that she pretty much goes along with Hari Jivan's narratives and his positions on issues like this. So it would be really courageous of Sat Bachan to stand up and to go against her husband. That would be really a major courageous thing for Sat Bachan Kaur to do. And maybe if people write Sat Bachan Kaur and encourage her to stand for the truth, maybe she will. Who knows? I will video to the website where you can access the profiles for all of these candidates who are running for this Siri Singh Sahib Corporation board, including Sat Bachan Kaur. And I'll also include at the end of the video some screenshots of these profiles of the people running for the Siri Singh Sahib Corporation board. And also, like I said, it's interesting about how they have to take this oath to Yogi Bhajan. I have that here as well. One thing to point out here, the Sat Bachan Kaur, she says here, and further, the Siri Singh Sahib Corporation's duty to serve the Sad Sangat and the Siri Singh Sahib Ji's vision and mission. So this is when in her statement, in her candidate statement, where she says she's serving Yogi Bhajan's mission. So for all of you who don't know, they call Yogi Bhajan the Siri Singh Sahib, which is this title, questionable title, that Yogi Bhajan gave himself. Now I'm looking at this member's oath, which all of the people in the Khalsa Council and these ministers who vote in this election evidently have to take. And it's called Member's Oath. And it says here, I pledge my loyalty to the Siri Singh Sahib of Sikh Dharma. So that's part of the oath they take. And I think that anybody who is concerned about the people teaching their Kundalini Yoga and further possibilities of abuse should write these Sikh Dharma ministers and tell them to take out that oath. Because, you know, if they're giving their oath to a person who has been sexually abusive and sexually harassed people, been abusive towards students for power, money, and sex, then this is something that should change. In my opinion, they shouldn't be giving an oath to somebody like that. Now, as I've said, I experienced a lot of abuse by Yogi Bhajan when I was around him, and I could go into a lot of stories and a lot of experiences that I had with Yogi Bhajan, but I won't do that in this video. You can read about it in my book, and I've got many other videos where I talk about specific examples of how Yogi Bhajan abused his students for power, money, and sex. There's a lot of pictures at the end of this video as well, which show a lot of the places and the events that transpired during the 70s and 80s when I was part of the group. And they also show a lot of the places where Pamela lived and worked as well, so you can get some better idea of these different places and the events that took place. Thank you for your time, and I hope you watch some of my other videos and read my book. And read Pamela's book too, of course. There's a lot of good information in there, and a lot of things, like I said, that I didn't know about and were a real eye-opener for me there in that book. And I think, from what I can tell, and the experiences that I had during that time period in Los Angeles and Espanola, Pamela is telling the truth. I will talk just a little bit about when Pamela was in Espanola in 1998. Many of the Yogi Bhajan followers accuse her of coming back and apologizing and saying that all of the lawsuit was just a big lie. Well, Pamela never made any public statement, and I never heard anything when I was there in Espanola in 1998. And Pamela said recently, you can read about it on my Facebook page, where she answers my question about this accusation that the Bhajanists make. And she replies that she never apologized to Yogi Bhajan. She came back only to reconcile with Yogi Bhajan. And it was only after Yogi Bhajan pleaded with her and just pursued her, she says. And she says she came back only after that time. So I encourage you all to go to this Facebook page and to enter this forum. It's really good. And even if you just read all the comments and the posts that are there, you really get an inside look at what's happening in the Yogi Bhajan organization and how this book and the revelations, we'll say, are really bringing about a big discussion and a needed discussion about all of these pain and the hurt that people feel, like myself and others that were part of this Yogi Bhajan organization. And we all realized after time that Yogi Bhajan was lying about the lineage of his Kundalini Yoga, that Yogi Bhajan was twisting the Sikh religion in order to fit his Tantric and Kundalini Yoga agenda. This was especially hurtful to me and disturbing, that when I read this book, Sikhism and Tantric Yoga, I discovered and realized that Yogi Bhajan was not teaching true Sikhi. He was teaching his twisted version, where he used Sikh mantras, Sikh Gurbani, because there are no mantras in Sikhiyas per se, but he was using these, the Sikh Gurbani, Kirtan, these Shabads, verses from the Sikh scriptures, and turning them into mantras, where he was saying that if you do this mantra with this yoga exercise, you'll gain success, or you'll gain power, or you'll gain health or wealth, all these things. Now, this is completely against Sikhi. And as Sikhs, we chant or we recite Gurbani, the Sikh scriptures, as a devotion out of love for God. We don't do it as a way to gain power or to gain money. This is a complete twisting that Yogi Bhajan did. He also, Yogi Bhajan also promoted Hindu mantras, which are against the Sikh tenets, the Sikh Rahat, as we say. Now, I'm not against Hindus. Hindus should practice Hinduism, to the best of their ability. But Yogi Bhajan said we were Sikhs, and here he was telling us to do Hindu mantras. It's just not right. And we thought that we were being Sikhs when we weren't. So this was a real eye-opener for me when I realized the Yogi Bhajan was mixing things. It was a real hodgepodge of teachings. And he lied about the lineage of this Kundalini Yoga. This Philip Deslepi has recently published a wonderful, informative article, academic study, called Maharaj Daban Tantric. And it shows conclusively that Yogi Bhajan made up this narrative, if you will, false narrative. He called it a golden chain, where he says that the Sikh gurus passed on this Kundalini Yoga to him. And Yogi Bhajan especially looked to the fourth Sikh guru, Guru Ram Das Ji, as his personal guru. And in Sikhi, we don't have, quote, personal gurus. Yogi Bhajan made this out to be some kind of like ancient wisdom or ancient secret. It was only revealed to him and not revealed to all the other millions of Sikhs throughout the world. It's just a complete fantasy. And it really hurts me. I was very hurt when I found out Yogi Bhajan had lied to me and other people in 3HO. And it may be some reason why Pamela left Sikhi. I don't know exactly, but I do know that most people who were part of the Yogi Bhajan organization and left that organization did not remain Sikhs. Not that they ever were really Sikhs, but it's really disappointing, if you will, and very painful that people would be misled by Yogi Bhajan. So we need to get this all out into the open. In my opinion, we need an independent investigator to look into all of these matters, to meet with people who were hurt by Yogi Bhajan or feel they were hurt by Yogi Bhajan, and take depositions, investigate all of this, so we can really get to the heart of the matter, and we can move forward what it amounts to. So again, please read Pamela's book and join this group. And if you have any questions, please put them in the description to this video. I'll be happy to try to answer them or to discuss with you anything that you would like. Thank you for your time. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.